And somebody remind me to turn the recorder off after I am done with my part, because I do want this to be a safe space for you all. And also, if it ends up being a 2 hour long audio, for damn sure ain't gonna be processing it and putting it nowhere. So so somebody remind me if I forget to turn the recording off for the conversation and Q&A part of our event tonight. All right, so back to centering. If everyone can just bring your mind to and your heart to just this one place that we all are present here for this evening. And see this space filled with love, the energy of love so strong, filled with light, the energy of the light beings that we are, filled so strongly in this room today. The energy of compassion, we ask for that to fill this space today. And I now ask for clarity to come and flow through me as I share my own experiences in the top of this event. And if there's a moment where I'm connecting with our divine beings for greater insight and clarity, I ask that you help me to hear clearly your words so that I can be the clearest vessel through which messages flow. And so it is. Okay, here we are. Before we start, so tonight I'm sharing just 3 questions that I often ask myself. 2 of them are when contrast arises, and 1 is when I have a desire. And I'm sharing this because this has made my life experience quite simple in how I look at contrast. And there's also a bonus thing on contrast as well that I added just before we started today. But it has just made my experience of how I experience contrast and how I experience any desires arising to be to feel very light and very effortless. And so I wanted to share that with you all tonight, and then we'll open up for Q&A. But before we go into what I want to share, there are a couple things that are on my heart that I want to open with as well. There is no right way to allow your desires to manifest. There also isn't a right way to move through contrast. Anyone who has heard many videos from me over the years has heard probably 40, 50 different ways in which we can navigate different things. So what I'm offering tonight is not the way, it is a way. It's an experience that I'm having, and I may no longer have that experience 5 years from now, 10 years from now, I may be in a completely different place. So there's no one way to move through any experience that you're having. And I want that to be the way that we approach everything that we are sharing here today. When we are sharing with each other, and when I'm sharing my experiences with you, I'm sharing through the filters of my own experiences, right? And that's the same for any of you that are sharing any of your experiences as well, because sometimes we can be so in love and excited about an experience that we have, and we want to go off and tell the world, this is how you do it, people. This changed my life, And there's nothing inherently wrong with us being that excited about what we have experienced and wanting to share it with the world. But it's beneficial to remember that that's our experience. And to the ears of someone else, it may not resonate. Some of what I'm sharing tonight may be so simplistic to you that you're like, but it has to be harder than that. I want more work, and you may gravitate to more processes and procedures. I did that for a while. and it was where I was at the time, so there's nothing wrong with that either. But just be aware that any perspective being shared here, by each of you, because sometimes you guys come live to, share something uplifting and an experience that you had and all of that. Be aware that it's just a perspective. It's not the way for anyone. It's a perspective. When I share what I'm about to share here this evening, it's my perspective. It's my experience. It's how things are working for me today. It's how I perceive things today. And anything that happens in our events are just our own perspectives and our current perception of the world and our current perception of how we view life and our current perception based on the filters of where we are with our spirituality and our spiritual journey. Sometimes a lot of what we're sharing is based on the filters, all of the filters that we've experienced in life so far, how we were raised, what resonates most for us, the things that helped us the most. But it's just a perspective anyway. Because sometimes we can feel so strongly about something that when we're sharing it, we're trying to convince the listener that this is the way to be, and there is no one way to be, and I have to remember that too when I'm passionately sharing something with someone else, that because I experienced it in a powerful way doesn't mean that it's going to resonate to the ears of someone else, right? I tend to be a very, very simple person in the way that I experience my own spirituality. There's, I don't do tarot cards. I don't do horror, what do you call it? Signs and all these different things. I don't do crystals. I have no interest in past life regressions. I don't tend to want to tap into past lives at all. I don't have any, I'm just very, very simple in my spiritual expression, right? So if somebody says, oh my gosh, this crystal changed my life, I'll go, cool, let me hear the story around it, but it doesn't resonate for me to have a crystal. You know what I mean? I don't have any crystals. So it's important for us to share from the space of knowing that we're sharing from the filters of our own experiences on Earth so far, and the filters of our own individual experiences as well. I also wanted to add that when messages are coming through from Spirit and I feel inspired to share those messages, that is also a perspective for this present moment. I remember a time when I was really getting into listening to people channeling and hearing the different perspectives. And I would wrestle with, but that's not what I'm hearing when I go to Spirit, or wait a minute, this person's saying this and that person's saying that, and they're both channeling. Or I went to Spirit last night with that question. I didn't hear that. I heard something else, And I wrestled with that for a while until I realized that all of the messages coming through on our planet through a whole, host of different channelers are just perspectives. Spirit is offering a perspective. Oftentimes that perspective is for that person who asked the question, and not necessarily for anyone else, because Spirit is aware of the totality of what's happening in their lives. Sometimes the answer that's coming through for an individual's question is not for just them, because Spirit knows that a more expanded answer would be more beneficial to everyone present. So there's a lot of different reasons why sometimes it's coming through because Spirit sees where we all are now, right? And that message changes as we go along, and as we evolve, we hear different things. It reminds me of Abraham Hicks, who had 3 steps to manifesting, 3 steps to getting in the vortex. And here we are 30 years later, and it's now 5 steps to getting in the vortex and to manifesting what we want. So I think there's always room for evolution, expansion, shifts, changes in the way that spirit wants to bring a message through. And it's very much a perspective that's being shared, and a perspective for the moment that it's being shared, and for the people that are present here today. Which is why I often say, take what resonates and discard what does not, because I don't know in this room, virtual room of people who, what parts of that message resonates with one person versus another. And sometimes we hear things that we're just not ready to hear. If you were to ask me years ago, before my spiritual awakening, did I resonate with any of this? Absolutely not. And if I heard it, I would have turned it off, So sometimes when a message is coming through, you can't receive it because you're not in the vibrational vicinity at times to receive what's coming forward. But sometimes it's not for you in that moment, and it's for somebody else, and it's okay to go, interesting, but doesn't resonate for me, and it's okay that it doesn't resonate for you for whatever reason. There's no need to explain the reason. There's no need to debate whether it's this or that, because there is no one right answer to anything. There's just a variety of perspectives being shared as we navigate our human experiences here. So now I'm going to move into the 3 questions that I typically ask, and I'll see if I can share some personal examples as well as I go into it. I have some default responses to life now that have been well practiced, I would say, in my own life experiences. So they have become my default response, and I'll kind of share what I mean by that as we move along. When we are experiencing contrast, it is far more common for our default response to be, what do I need to do? What process do I need to follow? What do I need to do here? What do I need to do? Right? And the mind defaults to, let's come up with what we need to do. Let's figure this shit out, And that tends to be the normal human response. And it was for me for quite probably the majority of my life. And still happens from time to time, as depending on the intensity of the contrast that's arising in my life experience. I can go to my brain first, rather than go to the place that offers for me now the most peace, the most knowing that all is well and everything is going to be fine, So oftentimes contrast feels heavy because it's not only the contrast, but it's the contrast and the mind like feverishly trying to figure it out, and also, will this ever be figured out? And will I ever find the answer? Will my life circumstances ever shift? And there's this compounding of density that's happening because the life situation itself that's arising really has no meaning. Right? We have all seen people with terminal cancer where one person is in bliss and joy and wanting to do the most for the world before their time here ends. And then another person is in utter despair and just cannot believe this is happening and desperately wanting for it to not happen, right? So the circumstance that's arising has no meaning whatsoever, but we tend to automatically give it a meaning. that adds to the density and the heaviness that we're feeling. And then we're trying to figure it out, and that adds to the density and the heaviness that we're feeling. And then we're wondering if we'll ever figure it out, and then despair gets added to the density of emotions that, we're swirling around in. So and more often than not, all of that density is swirling and happening because the perspective that we're holding is not at all the perspective of source, the perspective of our higher selves. Because source, our higher selves, our inner being, is never in a tizzy over anything. It is always at peace. It is always knowing that all will be well. So much, if not all, of the density that we're feeling while we're inside of contrast is because we're holding a perspective that is different than the perspective of source. So for me, when contrast arises now, not 100% of the time, but I would say most of the time now, I often go, all right, if I'm feeling any twinge of worry or any kind of dense human emotion, my default response is, so what is the perspective of source on this? What is this perspective of my higher self on this? And I get really quiet. Like I have to find a quiet place sometimes because, if something happens like, suddenly, and it kind of caught me off guard with the density that I'm feeling around it, I have to get quiet. Sometimes I just go for a walk, or I just go sit outside and just go, so what is the perspective of my higher self on this? And I give myself the space for that perspective to come clear. Now, that question may not always yield an answer when we're deep into the worry and the panic and the what's going to happen and the what ifing in the direction of what is not preferred. So one of the questions that I add to that is, and this has been very, very powerful for me. One of the questions that I ask, if I can't quite hear what is the perspective of source on this, I ask, how does this thought pattern, or how do these thoughts, how does this perspective that I'm holding make me feel? How does this perspective make me feel? And I'll tell you what I do with that. I know if the answer to what does this perspective I'm holding make me feel, if I say that to myself and I go, it makes me feel worry, it makes me feel uneasy, it makes me feel whatever, then I already know that's not the perspective of source. And I, for whatever reason, when I go, how does this make me feel? How does this perspective make me feel? Sometimes it's, perspective versus, someone else that we're thinking about. And you're having this thought about this person, you're angry towards them, you don't like something they've done, whatever it is, right? And you're holding this perspective about the other person, and you feel very righteous in your perspective that they should or shouldn't have done XYZ. Well, what's the perspective of source on that? And oftentimes the perspective of source is they're doing the best they can from where they are. And if we can connect with that perspective, judgment naturally dissipates. It doesn't arise anymore. We don't feel like, at least for me, I don't feel like I need to change the other person because they're in their own journey doing their own thing. And I know some of you may say, yeah, but what if they're doing their own thing is affecting my life? Well, a lot of that has to do with the vibrational contradiction we're holding. The more we move into blame and judgment, we add to that experience. We don't, it's not moving in the direction of dissipating, it's moving in the direction of expanding if we're holding on to our judgment and I need to tell this person they're wrong and I'm right. Right. And if we can ever get to the place, myself included, that there is no right, right, there's just a perspective being offered. And our attachment to that perspective is what makes us feel that we're right? No one wakes up in the morning going, I want to agitate Allison today. You know what I mean? That's on my to-do list, agitate Allison today. No one wakes up with that intention. So even by that mere thought in, in interacting with another person, I know that they didn't intend to hurt me. They didn't intend to, whatever the emotion it is that I'm feeling. And it's fine to feel whatever you're feeling, but feel it in the awareness that you're feeling it because there's discord between your perspective that you're holding and the perspective of source, the perspective of your higher self. And the more we come in unison with the perspective of our higher selves, the less we feel the density of emotion and the more we start to feel peace and joy, acceptance, compassion. Sometimes for me, when I go to, how does this make me feel? And I realize that the feeling and the emotion I'm having is because there's discord between my perspective and the perspective of my higher self. And I start moving more and more in the direction of becoming more and more aware of what is the perspective of source on this? What is the perspective of source with regard to this person? Oftentimes, and I can't promise that this will happen for everyone, but oftentimes I don't even want to talk about it anymore. It becomes a non-issue. It becomes so light that it's a non-issue. And I start going, why was I even concerned about that? This doesn't matter at all in the grand scheme of what I'm here to experience on this planet. Does that really matter? And I'm able to let it go because sometimes we want to confront another person or we want to we need to talk. You know what I mean? We all do that with when we're married or partners or whatever. We need to talk. You know what I mean? But before we do any of that, I find it far more beneficial to hang out with spirit on the issue, or hang out with my higher self on the issue and query into, what does source think about this person in the midst of what they're experiencing here? What does my higher self think of what this person said or what this person did? Because your higher self has nothing but love, compassion, understanding, empathy. That's what our higher self is feeling. And when we query into that, a lot of these conflicting experiences that we're having or contrasting experiences with other people in our experience starts to dissipate because we start to feel more and more of that empathy, compassion, love, and all of that, rather than all of the dense human emotions that typically arises in any of those situations. So in contrast, I'll summarize the contrast and then I'll add one bonus one. Well, let me add the bonus one and then I'll sort of summarize. If we become aware that, or more aware as we go along, it's never perfect, right? It's never perfect. But if we become more and more aware that the emotion that we're feeling is pretty much telling us how much proximity we are to the perspective of our inner being and our higher self. When we're wrestling, we're like, oh God, I wish this would stop. I want to, that's not what our inner being or higher self is saying. Now, I don't say this to send you into self-judgment because your higher self doesn't judge you either. Your higher self is just curiously observing our human reactions to things. Our higher self is not in judgment, so it makes no sense to go into self-judgment. But I am much more aware in this phase of my life experience that if I'm feeling dense human emotions, it's normal because it's part of what I came here to experience, but it's just an indicator that I'm moving further from the perspective of my inner being and my higher self on this particular issue, topic, experience, situation, etc. So the emotions of worry and concern and hopelessness and self-judgment and when we don't feel self-love, all of those emotions are just indicating they're denser because, and they feel denser because it's not what our higher self feels. And the denser the emotion, the further away our perspective is from the perspective of our inner being, our higher self. And we're believing the lies of the mind, you know. And the emotions that are lighter, a lighter frequency, when we're feeling peaceful, hopeful, joyful, all of that frequency, is also an indicator. I am closer to the perspective, or I am in the perspective of my higher self. When we're feeling that all is wellness, and, you know, and we're never there 100% of the time, because if we wanted to be there in peace, joy, love, bliss 100% of the time, we would not have come into these physical vessels, right? So, so that's important to remember as well. The bonus one that I wanted to add, and then I'll go into desires and kind of my default, right? What if our default response, and I had written this down, what if our default response to contrast becomes, what is in this for my own evolution and expansion? What is in this for my own evolution and expansion? Rather than, what do I need to do about this? Because what I have found more and more is when I ask that question as my default, or one of my defaults, I'm no longer focused on the person, the situation, the circumstance, but I have shifted my focus to my personal evolution through all of this. Like, I start to become curious about, well, who am I going to be on the other side of this? Who will I become once I have made my way through this challenge or interesting experience that I'm navigating? And my curiosity moves in that direction. And the heaviness of emotions that I was feeling around it naturally dissipates. Why? Because my focus went in another direction. Whatever we focus on expands, right? So now I'm expanding my awareness of, what's this here for? What aspects of my human journey is this here for? Oh, so it's for me to feel okay in this kind of situation, even though my initial response was worry or concern. I see. So what can I learn from this? Given that my initial response was worry and concern, there's room for more evolution and more expansion here. Cool. Let me have a conversation with spirit on highlighting what juiciness is here, you know, in this sticky situation. What's here for me in all of this? Because there's not a single experience of contrast that is not here for our personal evolution, growth, and expansion. Not a single one. Nothing. There's no experience of contrast that is not here for greater expansion, evolution, moving us in the direction of more love, more compassion, more peace on our planet, more joy, more acceptance of others, you know? There's not a single contrast that is not here to move us in that direction, but we often get so caught up in, I need to find a solution to this. I need to figure this out. What am I going to do about this? And that's normal. That's natural. It's okay. It's part of the human experience. Do not go into self-judgment if you're going there. But our default response is all this, ooh, you know, this whirlwind of worry. And we've practiced that so much that it's become our default response at times. But the more we move in the direction of, what is the perspective of my higher self on this? How does this make me feel? And what is this here for? What aspect? Because I know it's here for evolution. I mean, I don't even have to ask. I know this contrast is here for evolution, expansion, and growth. That's that's by design, right? So what is the expansion, growth, and evolution that's wrapped up within this experience that's unfolding here today? So those are the things that I wanted to offer with regard to contrast. And I would say over time, these have become my go-to um, place where those questions are what I sit with. Rather than what do I need to do, I kind of lay that aside for a moment. I'm like, yes, the situation is here. Well, I'll know what to do in the piece that arises from what I know gets me there, you know? So the default response of what is the perspective of my higher self on this? What evolution expansion is this here for? And how does this make me feel always gets me to clarity that I've moved away from the perspective of source. Because if I name an emotion that I'm feeling and it's not peace, joy, love, bliss, well-being, I know that the perspective that I'm holding on to is different than the perspective of my higher self, and it moves me more in the direction of that perspective. With regard to desires too, it's no different, right? Because oftentimes with desires, we have a default of what do I need to do to manifest this? What process do I need to use to manifest this? Who do I need to talk to, move in more direction? What YouTube videos can I research to get whatever, you know? And this question is so simplistic, yet if I just sit there, forget about what do I need to do to manifest, what process do I need to use, blah, blah, blah. If I just sit with this, the answer to this question, and I just languish there, clarity arises. Things start manifesting in my experience that are breadcrumb trails to the thing that I wanted. And the simple question is, instead of what do I need to do, what process do I need to use to manifest, what video I need to go watch to learn how to manifest better, blah, 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 right? All I do is I go, and how does it make me feel? So here's an example. I have a lot of philanthropic desires arising within me right now. And it feels freaking exciting. There was a night this week, I think it was Tuesday night. I couldn't sleep. I was tossing and turning from about 1 a.m. until 3 a.m. because all of these ideas started coming into my mind for philanthropic things that I want to do. And it was so exciting that it kept me awake. And the thing that kept me awake was this. I was going, and how does that make me feel? Because when, let's say, for example, I want to have this philanthropic experience, right, to help others. I could start going, okay, so who do I need to contact? What do I need to do? How do I need to make this happen? In what ways do, and you start planning, right? That's the normal human response, is we start planning. But as I was laying there in bed, every time an idea popped up that felt like a really nice desire, I'd go, and how does that make me feel? And when I say, how does that make me feel? Not how does the thought about it potentially happening make me feel, but it's what does the doneness of that desire, what does that feel like? Because it's already done, right? We already know when we conjure up a desire, it's already done. All that's really left is for us to move into vibrational alignment with that completed, right? Because it's complete in our vibrational reality. And to bring it into our physical reality, we simply have to be the embodiment of exactly that. How does it make me feel? So for example, you look into your bank account, you're like, there I am with just a small amount of money, and I really want an abundance of finances. I want an abundant flow of money. And how does that make me feel? Like, what does an abundant flow of money feel like? Like, what does it feel like? Spend a lot of time there. What does it feel like? Use all of your emotions, senses. Like, what would you do? What would you eat? Where would you be? Where would you live? What would you do with your financial, area of your life? Who would you want to hang out with? Where would you go? Traveling is not my thing, but for some of you, traveling may be it. And if traveling is it, what does it feel like to travel? What does it feel like when you get there? What would you do when you get there? And how does this make me feel? Moves me into the vibration of the doneness of that thing. And when I move into the vibration of the doneness of that thing, I am no longer thinking, how's this going to happen? I am celebrating the thing. And I'm already feeling like the reason I couldn't sleep a couple of nights ago was I moved so strongly into the feeling and the embodiment of the doneness of that philanthropic endeavor that I had in mind. And I have a few different things in mind that are just jazzing me up and making me feel very, very happy. But the thing that was keeping me awake was I started having emotions arising, and I started feeling like it was already done. So what it felt like once I had already done that was completely engulfing my being, and I couldn't sleep. It felt exciting. It was washing over me. It was like just all these different things. And I have noticed that what happens if I just stay here, like I don't even have to worry about, I don't have to think about what's the first step, what's the next, that'll come quite naturally, that'll come. And what I notice is if I have a desire and I just go to, and how does this make me feel? And I just languish there. Like I don't have to think about anything else. I just want to languish there. Like bring all my senses in, smell, taste, touch, hearing, feeling, all of that, emotions, everything. And I go, how does this make me feel? And I just I go there like fully. It's like, it's a very normal thing for me now to just fully go there when a desire arises. I completely skip, how's it going to get done? I just go straight into, and how does this make me feel? And here's what I've noticed. The more I do that, which is very common for me now, the more that I do that, the more an avalanche of synchronicity starts happening. Like I'll stumble upon a video and somebody will call me or somebody will text me, or I'll, suddenly find something that I wrote a while ago that's a reminder that moves me in that direction even more. And I'll have a conversation with a family member, and everything, it's like, that's coming up. Get that, right? And it just starts, it unlocks an avalanche of everything, because what you're doing when you go, and how does this make me feel, is by answering that question, you are by default the embodiment of that which you prefer. So when you become the embodiment of that which you prefer, of course, the avalanche of manifestations starts coming your way, and that thing makes its way into your experience quite effortlessly. So that how does this make me feel response is such a strong embodiment that you don't have to do anything else. Yes, you can go to processes and all that if it makes you feel good, and if that, feels resonant for you. But I take the easy path, and I just go, and how does this make me feel? And I just live there. I just live there. And every time the desire arises, I was literally laying in bed when the thought of philanthropy was coming up and coming up and coming up. I was literally laying there in bed with a big smile on my face, like, oh, right. Like I literally felt laying in bed like I was already living that reality, simply by asking the question, and how does that make me feel? Same goes for illness. A lot of times when some kind of bodily discomfort is occurring, we're constantly thinking, should I go to the doctor? Should I take this medicine? Do I need this medicine? Should I go figure it out? Should I go talk to somebody else? Should I go to a healer? Should I go to, and by the way, healers aren't healing you. They're simply creating the space for you to heal yourself, right? I think we've had that conversation before. But what about, and how does it make me feel to not have this ailment? What does it feel like? And languish there. What does it feel like? What would you be doing differently? How are you now that you are completely healed? How does that make you feel? Sometimes when we hear move into the vibrational vicinity of what you prefer, and it will begin to manifest, we kind of wrestle with that. It's like, well, how do I do that? And like, what is there a process? Like, what are the steps? And if we just go, and how does this make me feel? A lot of times the things that we desire we're not allowing it into our experience because we don't even know what it feels like. We just know we want it. I want more money. Okay. And how does that make you feel? I don't know. I don't have any money. Right. And if we can't bridge that gap to move into the embodiment of what is preferred, it almost turns the faucet off, because we're just in that space of wanting rather than in the space of experiencing it. And when we ask ourselves, and how does it make you feel to have that? You almost cannot not be the embodiment of that which you prefer. And it makes it so much simpler and so much easier to just move into that space. And that's all I have to share. So let me just review, and then I'll turn off the recording and go to your questions, comments, and whatever else we've got for this evening. So in contrast, rather than the default of asking, what do I need to do? What is the perspective of my higher self in this experience? And sometimes it can be difficult to move into the understanding of the perspective of your inner being, your higher self, in which case, how does this thought make me feel? Is a very easy question to ask, to point you in the direction of, so I'm definitely not experiencing the perspective of source on this because I feel worry, I feel fear, I feel whatever. And the bonus there is, what if our default response to contrast becomes, what is in this for my evolution and expansion? Because if we move our thoughts in that direction, we move away from the focus on worry and fear. And while we're over here, clarity is arising, peace is arising, joy is arising. And then that arising of peace, joy, and clarity opens the door for clarity to come on what needs to happen to resolve whatever is arising. And for desires, rather than asking, what do I need to do? What manifestation tool do I need? What steps do I need to take? What video do I need to go watch? Shift to, how does this make me feel to have this experience? It's done. It's complete. It's already done in your vibrational reality. So how does it make you feel to be experiencing that? And languish there. Just stay there. How does this make me feel? All right, so I am complete with our opening. I'm going to turn off the recording, and then we'll go into Q&A. And I'll read your questions. If you have anything that you want to ask, you can go into the Q&A form. And if you have something you want to share or a question you want to ask, you can raise your hand. And I'm going to stop everything and move into Q&A. And as we close, I just wanted to remind you to always take only that which resonates, because your higher self, your inner being, your soul, your spirit knows what is relevant for your unique personal journey at this point in time. And it's always wise to check in with your heart,
to see what genuinely resonates and move forward with only that. And know that you are always free to fully trust your inner guidance above any external guidance you may receive. See you soon.